The cool breeze would flow over Bell's face, as the night would be filled with the scent of smoke, mirrors, and the entertainment of the pleasure quarter of Orario. He turned one last time to the girl who had saved him, the blonde fennec-eared girl, Haruhime. She'd have a soft smile on her face, gently waving as he turns, nodding, before jumping down to the street level below. As he descends, this is when his enhanced senses would catch something that not even the ordinary adventurer would perceive. He'd feel the shift in emotions of Haruhime. He'd turn, seeing tears filling her eyes as her lips would move. He'd clearly read them in that split second. As his feet touched the ground, he'd have clearly heard it. "I'm so glad I got to meet a soul as kind as you, before it all comes to an end." Welcome to level 7 for What If Bell Cranel had the system from solo leveling. If you guys are new around here, then you know what to do. Go check in the description or up top in the upper right hand corner. You'll find the playlist with all prior 6 parts, so you can catch up and get to where we are here today. But enough of that. Let's get back into the story, shall we? Bell's eyebrow would raise. Kind, huh? I'm not sure I would use that word to describe myself anymore. Bell would look down into his shadow. Maybe I'm being a bit too overprotective for someone I just met. But if nothing else, she made me feel a bit like my old self again. And for that, Bell would leave one of his shadow soldiers as it merges into Haruhime's shadow, climbing up the tower.
I heard a voice. I think he's over this way.
No time to think, huh? Oh well. Bell would activate stealth, fading into the shadows as he'd slink out of the pleasure quarter, returning back to mainland Orario, where he'd head back to his mansion. Upon entering said mansion, he'd be greeted by the sight of his shadow soldiers sitting at a table having dinner, with them holding plates and forks and knives and imitating a dinner. Igris would be sitting at the head of the table reading a novel as he turns now, looking at his master, Bell, and nodding towards him. Bell would go slack-jawed, thinking, maybe I've been a little too lenient on them. We should get back into the dungeon soon, huh? Oh yeah, speaking of which... quests. Bell would pull up his quest screen as the system would roar to life, showing his daily quest completed alongside the Demon King's Castle Part 1 quest. Upon defeating Vulcan the first time, he had been so enthralled upon looking at the Orb of Avarice, an ability of an item that could double magic power and output, that Bell had completely neglected to check the third item he had received. A fragment of the World Tree, a crafting material. Upon now facing Mitas, a necromancer who could wield the power of the undead on the 75th floor, he came across this being with similar abilities to himself, with his own shadow army. Of course, with Titan and Igris on his side, and Vanity and his troop, it was but a matter of time. With Vanity using his own flame magic from life, his tracking flame discs of Aro Zephyrus, he was melting through the zombies, and Igris with his swordsmanship was likewise doing the same, Titan taking out battalions of them. When Bell had fought him in one-on-one combat, slicing him down, Mitas seemed like barely a challenge at all. Compared to himself, he was far less of a physical fighter, relying more on his necromancer abilities. As Bell used Fatal Strike, carving into the demon's now remaining bones, he would fall. A large number of demon souls would have flowed into his system, greatly advancing his completion to the quest of collecting demon souls, Part 1. He had received the spring water from the Forest of Echoes, one of the rare ingredients necessary for crafting the divine water of life. For what purpose he was being given this item, he had no idea. But apparently it was something he greatly wanted, something he desired from within his soul. So he continued fighting. The Demon Monarch's necklace was an S-rank item that boosted his agility and intelligence, increasing his ability to think in combat and use more of his shadow soldiers. But out of all of these rewards, the most troubling one was reward 3, any item from the system shop. Bell had an idea, a nagging one at that, but he had yet to claim the reward. Bell was beginning to face an impasse. Do I sacrifice some levels and spend time with Wolf and Lily in the dungeon here in Orario? Or should I use the key and return to the Demon King's castle for a while? But his thoughts would be interrupted. Suddenly the door would open behind him as we see Soma walking into the dinner hall. "Ah, Master Bell, you're back. That's perfect. I actually just had a new brew I wanted you to try," Soma would say as he pulls out a cup of some mysterious liquid. Although the air above it seemed to be shimmering, Bell could only imagine what proof of alcohol he was trying to get him to drink next. "Can't say I'm not testing the limits of the system, that's for sure." Bell would down the cup with Soma watching with admiration, his eyes lighting up as Bell would place the cup down as the system would neutralize the poison. "Ah, Master Bell, as impressive as always," Soma would clap. Bell's eyebrow would now twitch. You know, you don't have to call me Master, Soma. It's fine, just call me Bell." "Oh, really? I thought it was common courtesy inside of Familia for a child to address their patron in such a manner. I'm merely following etiquette, am I not?" Soma would say as he takes a sip of the wine. He'd spit it out saying, "This is a pretty bad batch, huh?" Bell would put his hand down saying, "So you knew it was bad?" The two having a few other quarrels of back and forth. Eventually, Soma would return back to his distillery, waving off Bell, saying he doesn't need dinner tonight. Bell would insist, sending some food with him and telling him to make sure he eats it. "I know you're a god, but you should still take care of yourself, alright?" Yeah. Soma would yawn, his hair covering his eyes. The god would return to his more typical listless state, returning to his quarters. Bell would sigh, thinking that he's got some interesting characters now living in the house. He would ultimately decide to pursue the Demon King's castle, considering that he could continue getting stronger much more efficiently there. Inside the dungeon he had to be wary of other adventurers, but inside of the Demon King's castle, there was only himself, his soldiers, and those he could slay. He didn't have to be careful about his targets. That was only further solidified due to the nature of the dungeon. Inside the Demon King's castle, Bell had much more freedom to move, but inside the dungeon of Orario, many of the hallways were narrow and straight, meaning that he had far less mobility than he would like, considering his intense speed and his agility. And since Bell, unlike Jinwoo from the original Soul Leveling, already has the Salamander's Cloak, he doesn't have to worry about continuing up to higher floors in the Demon King's castle. The Salamander's wool cloak actually protects him from the heat, absorbing and now insulating him when he wears it. So Bell, donning this cloak, would be able to further ascend. He would leave a note in the mansion, telling Welf and Lily what was going on and that he would be away again for around 2 to 3 days. He was merely planning to level up for a little bit and then head back out. However, as we return to the Demon King's castle, Bell would release his shadow soldiers all at once, with the 57 that he had brought now going off into the dungeon to slay more demons. Bell simply rode atop Titan's shoulder for a while as he continued surveying the area. As Bell continued finding passes, he'd eventually come to an impasse, that being where his soldiers were being wiped out one by one, and his mana going down with it. He'd take a sip of another mana potion, throwing the bottle to the ground, now empty, seeing that another group of knights were getting attacked. I guess it seems like they're avoiding Egris's group. Whatever's attacking must know and identify the weaker of my soldiers. Of the shadow soldiers Bell currently commanded, he kept at his side the 3 mages and Titan. The rest of them were then split up into 3 groups, with Egris leading a patrol of knights, the hellhounds and other monster creatures taking their own group, being led by a random minotaur he had slain during his training before the Apollo wargame, not the first minotaur he encounters, might I add, since he didn't have the Shadow Monarch abilities yet, but I digress. The final group of shadow soldiers was led by Vanity. Vanity being the shadow of Hyacinthos that Bell had claimed after defeating the Apollo Familia. Of course, when Titan had laid siege to the castle, there were naturally casualties of these adventurers. As such, as you may guess, this final group of soldiers led by Vanity was entirely comprised of shadows that had been extracted from the Apollo Familia's base, after the rubble had settled, that is. So mostly level 2 to 3 adventurers. Interestingly, only the second group, the beast-type shadow soldiers, which had less organization than Egris and Vanity's respective groups, were the ones being attacked. I thought they were attacking based on strength, but Vanity and the other adventurers' shadows are weaker than my other soldiers. I suppose their organization must pose a threat to the group that's attacking us. Bell would keep this in mind, wondering if there was some way he could increase his Shadow Soldier's ability to command and lead, wondering if he could run practice to help increase their ability to organize in battle. But enough of that for now. As his group was being attacked again, Bell would tell Titan to throw him. Titan grabbing Bell and tossing him into the air, Bell would brace for impact as he uses Ruler's hand on his body. Slowing his momentum as he crashes into the stone ground, he'd begin running at full speed, easily making it to the location of his monster-type group. As he arrives, he'd see his hellhounds being cut down by demons wearing armor. These demons seemed far more sophisticated than Bell had originally given them credit for. Seeing their sword techniques, he'd watch for a moment before stepping in, saving his Shadow Soldiers as he cuts down 3 demon knights. He'd read these names as the system would give him experience. You have leveled up. Bell would glance at his system screen. During his fight with Eyes Wallenstein in the dungeon, he was level 76. It was becoming apparent to Bell that as he got stronger, he'd be forced to fight either higher caliber opponents or many lower level ones in order to level up now. Bell was about to cut down the last demon noble. This one would have a different appearance. The demon had been riding atop a mount, with it having golden armor. This was different from the soldiers that Bell had just taken out moments before. As Bell braced himself to end its life, he'd grab a hold of the Night Killer, now rushing forward as he's about to thrust it into its throat. That is, until he'd hear a voice.
Please have mercy. I surrender.
The demon noble would hold its hands up into the sky. Bell's face would be shocked as he stops his attack on her. He'd back up, asking, Are you a person? Why can you talk? Huh? She'd remove her mask as Bell would see her purple hair flow from underneath. Her ears would be pointed like an elf, and her eyes would be crimson red, much like his own. She'd have small tattoo markings across her face. Bell would be silent for a moment, just watching in shock. Seeing her face, he'd think of Ryu, his friend from the tavern. Bell would fill the silence from his momentary shock, asking if she has a name, or what should he call her. She'd introduce herself as Esil Radiru, from the Radiru clan of the noble demons. Bell would be stunned, again asking if there are other clans of demons. She'd nod quickly. Bell would turn his back for a moment, putting his hand on his chin, and almost as soon as he had, his senses would tingle. Is that a blade? He'd turn his eye quickly, his crimson red eyes meeting hers as she was holding her 2 double-bladed sword, trying to stab him in the back. Bell would sigh, giving her a "really" look, as she'd fall back to her knees apologizing, considering her position once again. It's not my preference to kill you, but if you pull any of that shit again. Bell would hold out his left hand, sharpening his thumb as he holds it against his neck, sliding to the left slowly. I can assure you I'll kill any of my enemies as well. Esil would mumble, apologizing again, with Bell scratching the back of his head, pulling his red cloak back as the wind causes it to flow. Bell would ask if she has any idea about the passes, the floor passes that you have to use to ascend to the next floor. I promise I'll spare your life if you'll just give me the floor pass, alright? He'd say quietly. Esil would nod as she says she'll take him to her father, the Radiru clan leader. Bell would retract his Shadow Soldiers as he follows behind her, with the 2 of them now heading towards the noble castle of the Radiru clan. As they approached the gates, the 2 demons standing outside would hold their blades out. Bell's eyes would narrow as Esil would quickly explain that he's a guest visiting her father. The 2 demons would stand aside, allowing Bell and Esil to enter into the throne room, where the Radiru clan leader and Esil's father would sit. His eyes would look up, seeing both Esil, his beloved daughter, and this white-haired, crimson-eyed man. As he narrows his eyes, he'd see deep into his shadow, where inside would be an army of soldiers. He'd scream out, "You cur! Esil, my daughter, I don't know how this man has tricked you, but he brought an entire army into our home. There's no way this person is here for peace." Bell would shrug, as Esil would try and defuse the situation, with the other demons pointing their blades toward Bell, with Esil standing at the center, saying, No, he's not, let's cut the crap already." Bell would put his arm around Esil's shoulder as she'd blush lightly. With his other hand, Bell would hold up 2 fingers, saying, I have 2 requests. 1, give me the floor pass to proceed to the next floor. And 2, I'm gonna need to borrow your daughter for a bit. You dare? Oh, no, I meant as a guide to get me to the other demon nobles. I see totally how that looks now. After a small comedic moment there, eventually things would settle down as the king would retract his breath. His face, having been bright red, would now return to its normal tone. He would retrieve the floor pass, giving it to him and telling him to get out of there. With Esil now being granted the position of his guide, Bell would wave kindly to the demon nobles, leaving behind the Radiru castle, ready to move on to the next floor. Meanwhile, back in Orario, Chigusa and Makoto of the Taka Mikazuchi clan had been now searching the red light district for the last week, looking for any more hints of this Haruhime, their childhood friend. Since Bell in this version of events never met Makoto due to the Passover party never occurring inside the dungeon, they have no real connection and no reason why he would have told her. So while Bell did mysteriously run into Haruhime by chance, just like in the original, it was not because of Chigusa or Makoto. However, just like in the original, Makoto would once again have fate turn in her favor. Seeing Haruhime within the window glass, her eyes would light up as she sees her, but Haruhime would pay her no heed. Her eyes would already look solemn. It was clear that Haruhime didn't want to see Makoto. She didn't want her closest childhood friends to see what has become of her. Haruhime would draw the veil on the windowsill, as members of the Ishtar Familia would appear, requesting them to leave, being kicked out of the pleasure quarter of Orario. While the two factions of the Ishtar Familia and the Freya Familia were preparing for war, Bell would continue ascending the Demon King's castle. One notable difference, however, is that Bell wouldn't immediately resort to violence. Since he has many opportunities to level up within Orario's dungeon, he's less critical on insisting on slaughtering the other noble clans. So instead, he'd approach them with gifts as Esil suggested, and wait for them to strike first. So, when they naturally take to their demonic disposition and attack them, Bell can say it was in self-defense, before he mercilessly slaughters them. Esil would soon begin to admire both Bell's bravery and courage, and his strength. Walking headfirst into an enemy castle, only to take out everyone from within it after they attack him and Esil. It was pretty brave of him, all things considered. Bell took absolutely no pleasure in slaughtering them. In fact, each time they went to a new castle, he hoped that they would be willing to settle it peacefully. And each time he was disappointed.
You have leveled up. 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 Regular quest. Collect the demon's souls, 2. The Demon King, Baran, resides on the top floor of the demon's castle. Defeat Baran and collect his soul. Quest requirements. Defeat the Demon King. Rewards. Number 1. Top tier runestone. Number 2. Bonus stats plus 30. Number 3. Undisclosed reward.
It was this last part that left him unsettled the most. You see, when Bell had first returned to the Demon King's castle and had begun ascending floors, it was only on the 80th floor that he had now run into Esil and other demons capable of speech. These thoughts and more would all stir within Bell, until on the 89th floor, he'd finally ask a question to Esil. Bell turns, his eyes glancing over at Esil, who would be staring off into the distance. Hey, Esil? Yes, Master Bell? Bell's eyes narrowed. He'd finally asked the question he'd been wanting to know for so long. Esil, have you and the Radiru clan always lived here in this castle?
For the last time, as I said before, it's Radiru. Radiru. Not Radir, not Raider, not Radirus. It's Radiru.
Uh-huh. And, my question?
Why were you attacking my soldiers? Or protecting that floor, for example?
Why is the floor passes so important to all the different clans?
Oh, that's probably because of the voice that we hear. It tells us to protect the area we're in.
A voice? Is it like the system? And when did you start hearing this voice?
Well, that would be the moment we opened our eyes.
Then, where were you before you opened your eyes here?
We were in the demon world one moment, and then the next, we were here.
There's other worlds? What could this all mean? And what were you doing while you were in the demon world, Esil?
We were preparing for war. War.
Esil, what were you preparing for war against?
It was a being so powerful it required all of the noble demon clans to come together just to stand a chance. It was Cranel Shadow.
Esil, are you okay?
You have surpassed the allowed amount of information. The conversation will be interrupted. You have surpassed the allowed amount of information. The conversation will be interrupted. Interrupted.
You have surpassed the allowed amount of
Information.
The conversation will be interrupted.
Esil would fall to the ground. Esil, are you okay? Bell would run over to her. She had fallen unconscious. Sweat would drip down her face. Bell would snap out of it. He had been looking for more information, but he had no idea what he was doing to her. Or, well, what the system was doing. So there's something the system doesn't want me to know about? Why? Damn it. Shop. High quality healing potion.
Would you like to spend 5,000 gold?
Yes, come on already! Blue light would materialize in his hand, as an elegant glass filled with a red liquid would be now in Bell's hand, materializing out of thin air, a high-quality healing potion. He'd rip the top off of it and gently tilt Esil's head upwards. With his hand holding the potion, he'd gently trace down her lips to the bottom of her chin, where he'd slowly tug gently so her mouth would part. And with that, he'd pour down the healing potion down her throat. The system would give him an announcement.
High quality healing potion, ineffective. The target's HP is at 100%.
Bell's hand that had been holding the potion would be quivering. With his now free hand, he'd set Esil down gently before falling backwards, throwing the glass bottle away, the empty shell of the glass shattering and reforming into light before disappearing. Thank the gods. As if though to mock this line of thinking, immediately as Bell had let his guard down, one of his shadow soldiers would be sending him a signal. Yes, the very shadow soldier he had placed on Haruhime over a week ago. Damn it, why now? Okay, we can do this. Come on out. Bell would summon forth one of his hellhounds, the large black wolves that now have red gleaming eyes and spout blue flames. Bell would lift up Esil, sitting on top of the hellhound and carrying her on his back. Bell would retract all of his shadow soldiers aside from the shadow hound that he was sitting upon, guiding it toward the nearest location where you'd have to use a floor pass to descend to the first floor. He'd use the first floor pass, jumping down to the 50th floor and then moving from there down to the first floor, all while carrying Esil. As they would get closer to the front gate, the system would have a notification pop up. Would you like to add Esil Radiru to your party? Add her to my party, huh? Bell would read the system notification pop up. By adding the non-player character Esil Radiru to your party, you will be allowed to retrieve her from the Demon King's castle for other quests. Would you like to proceed? Yes. Bell would exit the Tower of Orario. It would be close to midnight. He'd see smoke rising from the pleasure quarter. As he grit his teeth, he'd say, "Come out," as a second shadow hound would appear. Again, he'd summon one of his infantry, having it sit upon the shadow wolf and carry Esil. Take her back to the house. If she wakes up, tell her that I'll be back and just to stay put. Alright? Both the wolf and the infantry member would nod, riding off into the shadows. Bell would hop off of his new mount, saying that it might be faster if he goes on foot. However, Bell would retract his shadow wolf, activating the stealth skill. Suddenly, the pavement where Bell had been standing would crack, as we'd hear a burst of wind as Bell would start running at full sprint through downtown Orario toward the pleasure district of Orario, toward where his shadow soldier was alerting danger awaiting Haruhime. 3 days ago, Makoto and Chigusa of the Takakamikazuchi clan would have returned back to their Familia, explaining the situation to both their lord and the other members of the Familia. As the group was discussing, the god of the Familia, Takamikazuchi, or Taka from henceforth, would open the door with a creak. We can see the silhouette of a man with a feathered hat, that being of course the god Hermes. Hermes, with a light bit of persuasion, would be willing to divulge the information he had learned from Ishtar when she had feasted on him. That is, why she kept her golden-haired fennec fox girl so tied up in her cage. The Killing Stone. After Hermes had divulged this name, The rest of Taka's Familia would split up, looking for any information on this item, before discovering that it may be a rare magical item that only can function with that of a Ronald, that being the same demi-human bloodline that Haruhime is a part of. On the night of the raid, the Takamikazuchi Familia would have attacked the Ishtar Familia's headquarters, looking to break out Haruhime and save their friend. But it wasn't looking good. Oga was already cut up heavily from Aisha, one of the captains of the Ishtar Familia. While the Amazons would be doing battle with Takamikazuchi's Familia, Bell would soon come to arrive. With his enhanced senses, he'd spot her atop the tower, and in front of her would be a large, grotesque woman with a bowl cut. Her face was as putrid as the aura emanating off of her. Haruhime would be kneeling before a large stone, with a magic power flowing out of it. He didn't like the look of this. Meanwhile, Phryne Jamil, the captain of the overall Ishtar Familia, would be talking some mad shit to Haruhime.
Just because you're a little pretty doesn't mean you're quite the match for me,
the walking whale would say. As Bell ascends the Ishtar Familia's tower, he would inevitably walk into Ishtar herself, standing before the large bridge, watching as Sonjo no Haruhime was about to be executed for her dream of leveling up her entire Familia, to give herself a boost strong enough to take out the Freya Familia. Ishtar would turn with a grin. Oh, perfect. If it isn't Mr. Bell Cranel, the man who single-handedly took down the Apollo Familia. Her heels make a clicking sound as she walks toward Bell. Bell would narrow his eyes as his shadow would slightly wobble. He'd send one of his specific shadow soldiers down the tower to meet with Haruhime's shadow, slipping beneath Phryne's grasp. Bell would stand tall, over 1.5 feet taller than Ishtar. She'd walk up confidently to him, placing her hand on his chest, looking up into his eyes. Her eyes would gleam purple with a magical power. Charm magic. Isn't that right? You took down not only Apollo, but you're also the man of affection of that little bitch Freya, aren't you? Her eyes would gleam, looking into Bell's crimson ones, the purple energy of her magic power slowly enveloping him. She reached up to unbutton the top of his shirt, before Bell's hand would slap it away. The system would roar to life. Great spellcaster Kandiara's blessing. Permanent effect, longevity. All diseases, poisons, and status effects are healed, and sleeping will explosively increase regeneration. Foreign status effect detected. Status effect negated. Ishtar would stand back. You resisted my charm magic? How was that even? Not even a god could. When Ishtar had recovered from her shock, she'd look around to find that Bell had disappeared. She turned quickly, looking down upon the bridge where Haruhime was kneeling. As Phryne's blade would be raised over her, she'd yell to Phryne, her captain, screaming to kill that girl now. As the blade would come down towards Haruhime, Bell would scream out, saying, "Egress!" Blue lightning would spark. As the Shadowborn Knight, the commander of Blood Red Egress himself, would stand, his red mane flowing in the wind as he holds out his greatsword, blocking Phryne's great battle axe Gorda. As his own longsword would clash against the metal, sparks would fly. Haruhime would look up, saying, "Mr. Bell?" as tears would be flowing in her eyes. Bell would once again shout, saying, "Haruhime!" Phryne would turn, saying, The orphan." Before she can even recognize what happened, Bell would punch her in the back so hard her spine would go through her front torso, like a cartoon character. Phryne would go flying off of the bridge as she'd disappear into the pleasure quarter, screaming as she vanishes into the buildings. An explosion of dust and concrete could be heard. Haruhime would be shaking, asking why is he here? Bell would turn to Egress, thanking him and patting him on the shoulder as he kneels down by Haruhime. He'd pull out the knife killer as she'd flinch. Bell would put his hand on her head, stroking softly and saying, "Shh, it's okay. I'm here to save you." With that, the night killer he'd slash the chains binding her wrists and legs in but a split second. It was so fast she hadn't even perceived them all shatter. Ishtar, watching from above, would be horrified. Fear and anxiety would creep into Ishtar's expression. Bell would pick up Haruhime, turning as he'd activate stealth, vanishing from her sight as Egress, Bell, and Haruhime would disappear, the killing stone would shatter. She'd punch her fist down to the stone railing, thinking, damn it. Why did he show up for that girl? No, is he already working for Freya? Was I set up from the beginning?
Well, if it isn't Ishtar, it's been a while.
Ishtar would turn down the stone staircase, where she'd see, in all her splendor, the goddess of fertility and the goddess reigning over the most powerful Familia in all of Orario, Freya. The fear she had been feeling would change to anger, as Ishtar would say, You little skank. What, having the king isn't good enough? You had to have the orphan too, didn't you? You're just too greedy, always taking everything I want. Did you know? Was that your doing? Was that the reason my charm magic didn't work on him? Freya's eyebrow would raise. I have no idea what you could be possibly talking about. Her face would remain cool and collected, as if though her thoughts were a steel trap. Nothing was released from her gaze. Ishtar would then snap as she runs forward, trying to smack Freya as she throws a punch. Freya would simply sidestep her, tripping her as she pushes her over the tower. At that point, a beam of light would ascend into the sky, as Ishtar of the Ishtar Familia would be returned to heaven, having been slaughtered by Freya and her Familia. Meanwhile, while Bell was saving Haruhime, Makoto and the others from Taka's Familia would be saved by the Freya Familia, powerful level 6s of the Freya Familia, such as Dainsleif, Alan, the twins, and even Otaro would stand from afar watching as his eyes would narrow in on a certain fight occurring. He'd watch as Bell Cranel would instantly take out Frine. Bell, after picking up Haruhime, would turn. His blood-red gaze would meet that of Otaro's golden eyes. Did he sense me? That's impossible. Otaro would speak aloud. From this distance, that's impossible. Must have been a coincidence. He'd slowly descend from the building as Bell, Haruhime, and Igris, the Black Knight in armor, had disappeared. Meanwhile, Haruhime would be clinging to Bell with tears streaming down her face, while Bell would clear out the rest of the streets with his shadow soldiers, clearing the way, pushing away any adventurers as Bell would stroll through the street. Haruhime would ask why someone like him would choose to save her. She's not worth it. Just shut it already. Huh? Bell would look up, his eyes filled with determination. You don't get it at all. Bell with his free hand would start frizzing her hair, Haruhime asking, what are you doing? I'm trying to put some energy back in here because it's clear you're not thinking about what you're saying. You're really gonna tell the guy who just saved you that he wasted his time? I chose to save you, Haruhime, because you were kind and warm and saved me. Is that not enough? She would be stunned. But I'm tainted. I'm not worth being saved by a hero like... Fine, I get it, okay? But let me tell you a story, alright? A story about a hero. Haruhime would listen eagerly as Bell would continue walking out of the pleasure quarter, away from the flames and destruction. He'd begin his tale. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who lived out in the countryside. He lived there with his uncles and aunts, and of course his grandpa. His grandpa told the boy all about these hero stories and fairy tales, and growing up he wanted to be just like the heroes in them. Strong and brave, saving people, never backing down from a fight, chasing a dragon, you know? She'd nod, not interrupting him. Igris would block a strike from an Amazoness warrior as he slashes upwards, kicking her back into the alley, while Bell continues his story. Well, that grandfather told the boy all about stories of a great city where adventurers all congregated around a giant dungeon, a tower that pierced through the sky. These adventurers all had the dreams of becoming heroes. His eyes would glimmer, saying this with a soft smile. One day, the boy's grandfather went to bed one night. You see, he'd been getting very tired, much quicker than usual. And, eventually, he stopped waking up. The boy shook him over and over again, hoping that he would awaken. But nothing ever worked. Bell would have a soft smile on his face. You see, Haruhime, the boy's grandfather's heart still beat, his lungs still gave breath. He was merely in an eternal sleep, as if though some demon had come and cursed him. Bell's eyes would once again soften. Well, that boy one day eventually traveled to that city of heroes. And it wasn't as pretty or beautiful as he expected. It was cold, harsh, Haruhime would look down. The joy she had been feeling from this story and excitement and eventual sadness of hearing of the grandfather slowly would diminish her spirit. Bell would say, "The boy never gave up, and as he continued working, one day, he was given a second chance, and ever since he received that second chance." Bell would turn down smiling at her with a warm smile. He promised that he'd save anyone who he could get his reach on, anyone who he deemed worthy of saving, the people closest to him. That's you, Haruhime. So it's not up to you on if you deserve to be saved or not, alright? He would look down, realizing that she had fallen asleep. As he had exited the quarter, we'd hear Makoto running behind, asking, Wait! She'd scream, saying, "Please, give me that girl. I know you're a part of the Ishtar Familia, but..." She'd look up, catching her breath, as she spots, Bell Cranel? The orphan? What are you... Oh, that's Haruhime! She'd hold her hands out in desperation, not knowing where to go from here, not wanting to anger the Cranel Familia, and frankly having no idea why Bell Cranel was carrying her long-lost childhood friend. Bell would look down at Haruhime, then back to Makoto, asking her if she knows this girl. Makoto would nod fervently, saying that her and Haruhime, they're close friends. She'd ask if he'd peacefully hand her over. Bell would look up Makoto up and down. Using his sense skill, he realized she possessed no malice. It was clear she didn't intend to harm Haruhime. However, her weakness harming her was on another level. "I'm sorry, I can't hand her over to you." "What?" She grabbed her blade, now sweat dripping down her forehead. She could easily tell that this was not going in her favor. If she attacked him, there was probably no chance of her winning. But she still had to. Bell would hold a hand up, saying, "There's no need for us to fight. It's just, I would prefer to take her back with you to your Familia myself. There's quite some dangerous bears out tonight." Bell's eyes would narrow, thinking of the intense presence he had felt earlier. Whatever that thing was, or who it was strong. Makoto would sigh in relief, with Bell now promising that he would hand her over to the Takamikazuchi Familia so long as he was able to protect her and take her all the way there, gesturing to the destruction going on in the pleasure quarter at the very moment. Makoto would guide the way, guiding Bell as Haruhime would still be clinging to his neck. Bell would gently place Haruhime down on the bed where Makoto had set up the room for her, asking Bell if she'd be alright. He would turn, his eyes looking toward Makoto, who he had since been introduced to, before he'd smile, saying, "She's just exhausted. She'll be just fine." As Bell was prepared to stand from the bedside, Haruhime's hand would catch on his sleeve, holding it. She was still asleep. Bell would gently remove her hand, placing the cover over her, before turning to Makoto. "I hate to sound demeaning, but please take good care of her." He bowed toward her. "She deserves better than this." To lighten the awkward atmosphere, Bell would crack a joke. "Well, if I hear she's being mistreated again, I may have to come back and steal her." Makoto's hands would move fast, saying, We would never... I was just kidding. Sorry about that." He turned back, looking at Haruhime, before realizing he had his own sick patient at home. He thanked Makoto again before shutting the door and simply vanish outside the Familia's home. And within a few short minutes, he would appear in front of his own mansion, the Cranel Familia mansion gate. Inside, he would have found Welf and Lily sleeping on the couch, with Esil covered with cold towels and a wash basin at her side. It was clear that the Shadow Soldier had done its best in explaining the situation to the two, and Esil looked like she was in good health, but it was clear the two were exhausted. Bell would close the door behind him, the door making a creaking sound as it shut. She'd look up, seeing the portrait of Egress hanging above her and above the fireplace, the mantle. At her side on the other two couches extending, she'd find the small girl and the red-haired human man. Esil was obviously confused. The other two would begin to stir as well. Waking up, they'd see Bell walking in, his boots making a clicking sound on the marble floors. All three of them would begin speaking. "Hey, Bell! Master Bell! Master Bell?" Bell would wave, saying, "Oh, hey guys, everyone's awake, huh?" But to Welf and Lily's alarm, they'd turn looking back at Esil, as if though she just said something offensive about their mother. Guys, what's wrong?" "Esil, did you say something to them?" All three would look confused, looking at each other and back to Bell. Lily would ask, Master Bell? What language are you both speaking?" And that's a wrap for level 7 of What If Bell Cranel had the system from Soul Leveling. If you guys are looking forward to the events of level 8, make sure to go down beneath the video, hit all those awesome looking buttons. It would be really cool if you did that. Maybe even as cool as Bell with the system. Maybe not that cool. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.